After decades of silence, Brad Paisley finally reveals the truth about Diane Keaton. Before she became one of the most beloved and unconventional icons in American cinema, Diane Keaton was simply Diane Hall, a wide-eyed girl growing up beneath the California sun, forever caught between imagination and reality. She was born in Los Angeles in 1946 in a time when dreams seemed to shimmer just beyond the horizon. The world was changing, the nation was awakening, and so was she. A child of post-war optimism, destined to become a woman who would redefine what it meant to be both vulnerable and brave. Diane Keaton's story begins not in the glitz of Hollywood, but in the warmth of a modest home filled with stories. Her mother, Dorothy, was a homemaker who loved photography and self-expression. Her father, Jack Hall, a civil engineer who grounded the family in quiet practicality. It was a household balanced between imagination and order, a foundation that shaped Diane's understanding of the world. Her mother's creativity encouraged her to see life as an ever-unfolding play, while her father's steady presence gave her the courage to take risks within that play. From an early age, Diane was captivated by performance. She wasn't the loudest or the most glamorous child, but there was a spark, a curiosity that made her want to step onto a stage to explore the world through characters, costumes, and emotion. She often watched her mother perform in amateur talent shows and would sit wide-eyed as Dorothy became someone else under the soft glow of stage lights. That moment, that act of transformation, fascinated young Diane. She wasn't yet aware of it, but the seed had been planted, the belief that art could be both a disguise and a revelation. When she reached her teenage years, Los Angeles became her backdrop for discovery. The city was buzzing with the energy of the 1960s, a place where social rules were being rewritten, where art, music, and politics were colliding in unpredictable ways. While others might have sought stability, Diane was drawn to uncertainty. She wanted to feel life, not just watch it from the sidelines. She attended Santa Ana High School and quickly found herself pulled toward theater, singing, and public performance. Yet even then, she wasn't a typical star student. She was quirky, introspective, sometimes shy, but always passionate. Her classmates saw her as eccentric, but she didn't care. For Diane, being different wasn't a flaw, it was her truth. In her early 20s, Diane packed her dreams into a suitcase and headed east, to New York City. The city was loud, gritty, and alive with possibility. Every corner held a story, every sidewalk was a stage. She enrolled in the neighborhood Playhouse School of the Theater, where she studied under the famed acting teacher Sanford Meisner. New York was both thrilling and terrifying. Diane was an outsider in a city that demanded boldness, but she learned quickly. She studied the craft with quiet intensity, drawn to the authenticity that Meisner's technique demanded, to live truthfully under imaginary circumstances. It was there that she began shaping what would become her trademark style, an effortless blend of humor, vulnerability, and emotional realism. Money was scarce, but Diane was resourceful. She worked odd jobs, including singing in nightclubs, and sometimes even went hungry just to afford acting classes. She often spoke later of how New York toughened her, how it forced her to confront herself, her fears, her ambitions, her doubts. It was during this time that she made a small but fateful decision. She changed her last name from Hall to Keaton, her mother's maiden name, because another actress in the Actors Equity Association had already registered Diane Hall. That small change would soon become iconic. The name Diane Keaton would echo through decades of film history. Her first real break came when she joined the Broadway production of Hair in 1968. The show was radical, filled with anti-war themes, social rebellion, and an open embrace of freedom that mirrored the turbulent era. Diane, however, stood apart, famously refusing to perform nude on stage, something most of the cast accepted as part of the production. Her refusal didn't come from prudishness but from personal conviction. She was carving her own boundaries, her own definition of authenticity. That decision, quiet, simple, personal, defined her. Diane was never interested in conforming for approval. She had a deep moral compass that guided her through the chaotic world of entertainment. That integrity would become a hallmark of her career and her life. During her time in Hair, fate stepped in again. A young playwright named Woody Allen was casting for his play Play It Again, Sam, a comedy about love, neurosis, and the awkward art of connection. When Diane auditioned, her timing, her unfiltered energy, and her offbeat charm captivated him. She wasn't like anyone else. She was unpredictable and magnetic. She landed the role. The play was a success, and suddenly Diane Keaton, the once struggling student from Los Angeles, was being noticed. She didn't yet know it, but this collaboration with Woody Allen would not only shape the next chapter of her career, but also become one of the most creatively rich partnerships in modern cinema. When Play It Again, Sam was adapted into a film in 1972, Diane reprised her role and the screen loved her. She wasn't the conventional Hollywood beauty, and that was exactly why she stood out. Her presence felt real, approachable, unpredictable. That same year, she was cast in The Godfather as Kay Adams, the girlfriend and later wife of Michael Corleone, played by Al Pacino. It was a role that would propel her into the mainstream and forever tie her name to one of the greatest films ever made. Diane Keaton in The Godfather was luminous, restrained but emotionally layered. Amid the crime, corruption, and tragedy that defined the Corleone saga, her character provided a human heartbeat. She was the conscience, the moral witness. For a young actress still finding her footing, the performance was extraordinary. She didn't dominate the screen. She anchored it, grounding every scene in quiet realism. Her chemistry with Pacino was palpable. Off-screen, they became close. A bond built on mutual respect, fascination, and a shared sense of mystery. But more than that, The Godfather showed the world that Diane Keaton was more than a comedic actress. She was a dramatic force. The decade that followed was Diane's golden era, not just in career but in self-definition. She and Woody Allen reunited for several films, but none would become as legendary as Annie Hall, 1977. The film was both a romantic comedy and a quiet revolution, a love story told with wit, honesty, and heartbreak. The character of Annie Hall was in many ways an extension of Diane herself. She brought her own clothes to set: baggy trousers, men's vests, wide-brimmed hats, and that unforgettable tie. Her style was spontaneous, self-expressive, utterly original. It defied fashion norms and made her a trendsetter overnight. Women across America began dressing like her, not because she was glamorous, but because she was authentic. Annie Hall became more than a film. It was a cultural shift. It changed how romantic comedies were written, how characters were portrayed, and how women were seen on screen. Diane's performance won her the Academy Award for Best Actress, cementing her place among Hollywood's elite. Yet even amid the applause, Diane remained grounded. Fame didn't intoxicate her, it humbled her. She once said that she didn't see herself as a traditional leading lady, that her awkwardness, her quirks, her hesitation were all part of her charm. "I'm not sure I ever wanted to fit in," she admitted. "I just wanted to be real." Behind the laughter and success, Diane was introspective. She kept journals, collected photographs, and spent long evenings writing letters and reflections. She was fascinated by memory, how people remember love, loss, and time. There was always a layer of mystery in her public image, a sense that she was performing even when she was. Her compassion extended beyond her art. She was deeply loyal to friends, colleagues, and family. She was the kind of person who remembered birthdays, who listened more than she spoke, who noticed the smallest details about people. Those who worked with her often spoke of her generosity, not in material terms but emotional ones. She had an uncanny ability to make people feel seen. Whether it was a nervous young actor on set or a camera assistant struggling through a long day, Diane would go out of her way to offer encouragement. Hollywood could be cold, but she brought warmth to it. As she moved into the later chapters of her career, Diane continued to reinvent herself. She starred in Red's 1981, Baby Boom 1987, and Something's Gotta Give 2003, each time revealing new shades of who she was. Not just as an actress, but as a woman aging with grace in an industry obsessed with youth. In Something's Gotta Give, opposite Jack Nicholson, she played a playwright confronting love, heartbreak, and reinvention in her 50s. The film became a phenomenon not only because of its charm, but because Diane brought honesty to a stage of life rarely depicted with dignity on screen. She made aging look not just acceptable, but beautiful. Off-screen, she adopted 2 children and embraced motherhood with the same curiosity and devotion she had for acting. Family became central to her world. She often said that her children grounded her, that they reminded her what truly mattered beyond fame: the simple, everyday joys of life. Now in her later years, Diane Keaton remains an emblem of individuality. A woman who never stopped evolving, who found strength in imperfection and art in authenticity. She's still recognizable in her signature suits and hats, still unapologetically herself, still radiating that unique blend of humor and melancholy that defined her from the start. She has written memoirs, taken up photography, and even become a social media favorite for her quirky and self-deprecating posts. She celebrates life in all its contradictions. For her, aging isn't about fading, it's about deepening. When asked about legacy, Diane often turns the question around. "Legacy," she laughs, "I'm just trying to enjoy the moment, the rest will take care of itself." Diane Keaton's journey is more than a filmography, it's a philosophy. It's the story of a woman who refused to be defined by others, who embraced uncertainty, and who found freedom in imperfection. Her characters, from Kay Adams to Annie Hall to Erika Bari, all carry pieces of her essence: humor mixed with heartbreak, boldness tempered by tenderness. She made it okay to be awkward, to be unsure, to be real. She showed audiences that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it smiles through fear, laughs through loneliness, and dresses in a man's vest just because it feels right. In every frame of her work, there's a whisper of truth, A reminder that art isn't about perfection but about honesty. Diane Keaton didn't just act in front of the camera, she lived inside it. And through her, generations learned that authenticity is the most timeless kind of beauty there is. It was 1991, a year of bright colors, mixtapes, and a movie industry searching for its next feel-good story. The world was ready for a new romantic comedy, one that would remind audiences of family, love, and the small moments that make life extraordinary. What nobody expected was that a 19-year-old college student from Rye, New York, would become the beating heart of it all. Kimberly Payne Williams grew up in a world far from red carpets and film premieres. Her family valued education, community, and creativity. Her father, Gurney Williams III, was a journalist, a man who believed words could change the world. Her mother, Linda Barlow Williams, nurtured her children's curiosity, encouraging them to dream beyond the familiar borders of their suburban town. Kimberly was the second of three siblings, one of those children whose imagination seemed to glow from the inside. She wrote stories in spiral notebooks, staged small plays in the living room, and used her parents' camcorder to record elaborate home movies. There was something natural about the way she performed, not forced, not polished, just instinctive. By the time she entered Rye High School, Kimberly was already the go-to lead in school plays. Teachers described her as focused, kind, and quietly ambitious. She didn't crave attention, she craved expression. Acting wasn't a pursuit of fame, it was a way of understanding the world. When Kimberly was accepted into Columbia University, she entered a world of ideas. New York City was just outside her dorm window. Its chaos, its rhythm, its stories. She majored in drama, balancing classes with part-time work and endless auditions. The city became her classroom, every street corner a stage. She was still learning how to navigate auditions, the waiting rooms lined with hopefuls, the casting assistants flipping through headshots like cards in a deck. Most days ended quietly with rejection or silence, but Kimberly didn't lose hope. She saw each audition as practice, a way to understand herself better. Then came the call that changed everything. Father of the Bride 1991 was set to be a modern remake of the 1950 classic starring Spencer Tracy and Elizabeth Taylor. The new version would be directed by Charles Shire and produced by Nancy Meyers, a creative duo known for films that blended humor, heart, and family warmth. The studio wanted a newcomer for the daughter's role, someone authentic, believable, and real. When Kimberly's agent submitted her name, she almost laughed. She was 19, still in college with only stage experience. "They'll never call," she told her roommate, but they did. The audition was held in Los Angeles, far from the streets of Manhattan she knew. She flew out nervous but excited, wearing a simple dress and little makeup. She didn't try to act like a movie star, she just tried to be herself. A daughter who loves her father, a young woman standing at the edge of adulthood. Inside the small casting room, Charles Shire watched quietly as Kimberly began her scene. It was the moment when Annie Banks, the bride-to-be, tells her father she's getting married, simple on paper, but layered with emotion. Kimberly took a breath, smiled, and spoke the lines with a sincerity that silenced the room. There was no trace of performance, no pretense. It felt real, as if she were truly someone's daughter trying to share life-changing news. When she finished, Shire looked at his team and whispered, "That's her." A few weeks later, Kimberly's phone rang. The voice on the other end said words she'd never forget. "You got the part." She was stunned. "I did," she asked, half laughing, half crying. The next moment felt surreal. She was being invited to work with Steve Martin, one of the most beloved comedians in America, and Diane Keaton, a cinematic legend. She was still a college student, suddenly dropped into Hollywood's inner circle. Kimberly packed her bags, called her parents, and boarded a flight to California, not knowing that her life was about to change forever. The first table read took place at a studio in Burbank. Long tables, scripts neatly stacked, name cards printed in bold black ink. Kimberly found her seat between Steve Martin and Diane Keaton, two of the most recognizable faces in film. When she looked up, she felt a mix of awe and fear. Steve's warmth broke the ice, his easy humor filled the room. Diane, composed yet gentle, smiled and whispered, "You're going to be wonderful." That sentence, simple and sincere, melted Kimberly's nerves. The read-through began. As voices filled the room, Kimberly found her rhythm, listening, responding, trusting her instincts. Each laugh from the crew, each approving glance from the director built her confidence piece by piece. By the end of the day, she realized something profound. These people weren't mythic stars, they were artists, people who loved storytelling as much as she did. Filming began in Pasadena, where sunlit houses became the perfect backdrop for the Banks family home. The set buzzed with creative energy. Grips adjusting lights, costumers running between trailers, cameras rolling on dollies. For Kimberly, every day felt like a dream she was afraid to wake from. Her first scene with Steve Martin took hours to shoot, but he made it feel effortless. Between takes, he cracked jokes, showed her magic tricks, and reminded her to breathe. "Comedy's just honesty in disguise," he told her. Diane Keaton, playing her mother, became both mentor and friend. Between scenes, she'd quietly check in. "How are you holding up?" or want to run lines. She shared stories from her early days about the nerves, the mistakes, the joy of discovery. To Kimberly, Diane's kindness felt like a steady hand guiding her through the chaos. Kimberly learned fast how to hit her marks, how to adjust to lighting, how to repeat the same emotion take after take. She discovered that film acting was about control and surrender all at once. You prepare meticulously, then let it all go when the camera rolls. There's a moment in Father of the Bride when Annie Banks walks down the aisle, her father watching with tears in his eyes. It's pure cinematic emotion, the culmination of love, time, and memory. For Kimberly, filming that sequence was deeply moving. The church was quiet, lit with soft white roses and sunlight pouring through stained glass. As the music played, she felt her eyes well up, not from acting but from gratitude. In that instant, she understood what the film meant. It wasn't about weddings or dresses or comedy. It was about family, about the bittersweet beauty of letting go. When the director called cut, there was silence on set, then spontaneous applause. It was the moment everyone knew. Kimberly Williams wasn't just a newcomer, she was a revelation. When Father of the Bride premiered in December 1991, it became an instant hit. Critics praised its warmth and humor, and audiences fell in love with the Banks family. Steve Martin's performance as the overprotective father was heartfelt and hilarious, but it was Kimberly who anchored the story, the emotional center around which everything revolved. Reviewers described her as radiant, natural, and refreshingly genuine. For many, she reminded them of the daughters, sisters, and friends in their own lives. Overnight, Kimberly Williams became Hollywood's new favorite face. Magazine covers, talk show invitations, photo shoots. Her life changed rapidly, yet through it all, she remained grounded. She still lived modestly, finished her studies, and stayed close to her family. Success, especially early success, can be a double-edged sword. Hollywood can lift you up and test you all at once. Kimberly approached it with the same steady grace she brought to her work. She knew fame was fleeting. What mattered was craft. She continued studying between roles, taking time to understand the industry rather than chase headlines. She wanted longevity, not just a moment in the spotlight. That decision would define the rest of her career. 4 years later, the sequel arrived. Kimberly returned as Annie Banks Mackenzie, now pregnant and starting her own family. The film reunited the original cast, creating a rare sense of real continuity, not just in the story, but in the relationships formed behind the scenes. The bond between Kimberly, Steve, and Diane was palpable. They weren't just acting as a family. They had become one. Between takes, they shared meals, laughter, and advice. The sequel solidified Kimberly's place in Hollywood, proving she wasn't a one-film wonder. She had grown as an actress, more confident, more nuanced. The movie's success ensured that the Father of the Bride legacy would endure for generations. Looking back, Kimberly often reflected on what those first years taught her. Acting, she said, wasn't about pretending, it was about listening. It was about empathy, the ability to step into another person's shoes and tell their story with respect. She learned the value of patience, how good work takes time. She learned humility, that even in Hollywood, kindness travels further than ambition. And she learned courage, that sometimes the biggest risk is believing you belong. As the 1990s continued, Kimberly explored new roles in television and independent films. She appeared in Relativity 1996, a short-lived but critically praised series, and later starred in The 10th Kingdom 2000, a fantasy miniseries that earned a cult following. Each project revealed a different side of her: romantic-led, dramatic performer, comedic presence. But what remained constant was her sincerity. Kimberly brought authenticity to every frame, a reminder that acting at its core is truth told through another face. She also began directing and producing, curious about the creative process behind the camera. That curiosity would later define her next chapter. Fame never consumed Kimberly. She stayed grounded in her values. Family, faith, integrity. She often spoke about how she felt fortunate to have started young but not lost herself in the process. Her approach to life was simple: do good work, treat people kindly, and stay curious. She once said, "I never thought of myself as famous. I thought of myself as lucky. Lucky that I get to tell stories that make people feel something." For many actors, their first big break is a moment of arrival. For Kimberly Williams, it was a beginning, the start of a lifelong exploration of storytelling, empathy, and self-discovery. That first audition, that first call, that first day on set, they weren't just steps toward fame. They were moments that shaped her understanding of what it means to be an artist. She didn't chase Hollywood. She met it on her own terms. And by doing so, she became a quiet symbol of authenticity in an industry often defined by pretense. In 1991, a young woman walked into a casting room with no expectations. She spoke a few lines, smiled shyly, and left thinking nothing would come of it. But in that brief moment, she captured something timeless. The sincerity of youth, the honesty of love, the beauty of vulnerability. That sincerity still lingers. In the laughter of Father of the Bride reruns, in the memories of audiences who first saw her on screen, and in the quiet grace of the woman she became. Kimberly Williams' first break wasn't just a job, it was a moment of recognition, a whisper from fate saying, "You belong here." And she listened. Between takes, Diane would share small pieces of wisdom. About humility, about perseverance, about keeping your joy when fame tries to take it away. She invited Kimberly to lunches, rehearsals, and even quiet walks on set, always reminding her, "Don't lose the part of you that made them cast you." When Father of the Bride became a hit, the world fell in love with the on-screen family. But few knew how real that connection truly was. Diane celebrated Kimberly's success like a proud mother. She cheered when Kimberly returned for Father of the Bride Part 2. And long after the cameras stopped rolling, she stayed in touch, offering advice, laughter, and that signature Keaton charm that made everyone feel seen. Meanwhile, miles away from Hollywood, a young country musician named Brad Paisley sat in a darkened theater in West Virginia. He wasn't yet a star, just a dreamer with a guitar and a broken heart. He had taken his girlfriend to see Father of the Bride, and while she watched Steve Martin's jokes, Brad couldn't take his eyes off the actress playing the daughter. Years later, he would laugh about how that same girlfriend dumped him. But he kept thinking about Kimberly Williams. By the time Father of the Bride Part 2 hit theaters, Brad went alone, a man newly single but inspired. He didn't know it yet, but this film, this story, and by extension, Diane Keaton, had already started shaping the future of his life. Fast forward a few years, Brad Paisley had become a rising name in Nashville. His heartfelt lyrics and humor-filled storytelling had made him one of country's most beloved new voices. When it came time to cast a love interest for his 2001 music video, "I'm Gonna Miss Her" the Fish-In song, Brad made a single request. "Can we get the girl from Father of the Bride?" That girl was Kimberly Williams. The chemistry that started in a fictional movie family became real-life love. They married in 2003, and with them, Diane Keaton's influence quietly continued, woven into the very story of how they met. In October, the world said goodbye to Diane Keaton. But for Kimberly, it felt like losing a family member. When the news broke, Brad Paisley spoke publicly for the first time about the impact of her death. His voice trembled with sincerity as he said, "It really did affect Kim, you can imagine. She was 19 and her adopted parents in show business were Steve and Diane. Diane was always great to her, so to her it's like losing family." Brad wasn't just speaking as a husband, he was speaking as a witness to a legacy of kindness. He revealed the truth that few outside their circle knew. Diane Keaton didn't just change Hollywood, she changed their lives. Her laughter had echoed through their marriage, through the films that brought them together, through the love story that followed, and through the lessons she'd left behind. Brad reflected on what he called the magic of Diane Keaton. "She had that effect on people," he said, "who had the connection to her that Kim did. That mother-daughter relationship you saw in Father of the Bride, it was real." For Brad, watching his wife grieve a woman who had been both mentor and friend reminded him how rare genuine souls are in show business. In a world often filled with ego, Diane led with heart. Her warmth didn't fade when the cameras stopped rolling, it deepened. She was a bridge between generations, from her era of cinema to the new artists she inspired. And even in absence, she remains the voice reminding them, "Keep your joy and protect your story." Today, Brad and Kimberly continue to honor Diane's legacy, not with words but with how they live. Through love, creativity, and authenticity, the same values Diane embodied. Kimberly once said that working with Diane Keaton was one of the highlights of my life. But perhaps the real highlight was what came after. The friendship, the mentorship, the invisible hand that helped guide her into the woman she became. As Brad Paisley put it, it's a weird failing like losing family. But maybe in the truest sense, family never really lives. They live on in the stories, the laughter, and the lives they helped shape. Diane Keaton didn't just play a mother on screen. She was one to the people whose dreams she nurtured and whose hearts she left forever changed.